Hit it, Phil.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Can it be the breeze that fills the trees with rare and magic perfume? Oh, no, it isn't the breeze. It's Jackson time. La-da-da-da.
Stay tuned.
Right after this episode.
For our discussion.
And I hate to use that awful cliche, a legend, but what else? What else can you say? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jack Benny.
I'm going to Pomona.
You got to admit, the mayor's a good sport.
Sure.
The mayor is a good sport. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Johnny. It's nice to see you always.
I thank you for coming tonight. You're practically with us every trip we come out here, except if you're playing a concert with one of these symphony orchestras around the country or in Las Vegas.
Well, I like to do a lot of these shows. I wish I could do them as often as I like. But I can't because so many of my friends now have these shows, you know. And then if I do one, I have to do the other and the other. I'm getting pretty sick of you, too, you know. No, really, I'm on every time he comes here, or when I come to New York. I said, gee, Jack, you haven't been on with me for 10 minutes, you know, or something like that.
You can't do them all, I know.
No, I can't. But I got to tell you something. I had to turn down a show just a few days ago, and I wanted to do it for one reason. It was a legitimate panel show, not a comedy show, you see. It was a show where they have two couples, and they wanted Mary and I to, or Mary and me. What is it?
Mary and me, I think.
Mary and me, is it?
Doesn't make any difference.
I wouldn't dare make a mistake here, you know, in front of things. Mary and me to come on the show. And they talk pro and con on certain subjects, you see. And I couldn't make it. And I know I can't get Mary to go on anymore anyway. You know that. I can't get her to work. I can get her to spend. Nobody but spend, but I can't get her to earn it, you see. Well, anyway, I've got to tell you something. I watched this show, then I was sorry I wasn't on it, because they got onto a subject of sex education in schools and things. Now, this got so ridiculous that I thought, oh, if I were only there so I could say something. Because they were talking, I can understand sex education in school if it involves health and things like that. But they were merely talking about sex education. Now, I would like to know why you have to have schools for sex. Everybody knows at a certain age, don't they? They know all about it. Even animals, they don't go to school, do they? Huh?
Not that I know.
They know about sex. You know, they know how, when, where. Maybe not always where, but they know. I think the animals don't always know where, but I started to think, and the conversation got so out of hand as though nobody ever knew about it unless you went to school. And I don't know, I can go back, you can go back as far as Adam and Eve if you want to. You know, she gave him a bite of an apple, and that was that. I wish it was that easy now. I mean, no, really.
What do you remember from what?
But going back, and then you go back, I don't know, it got to be real silly, this conversation. And I was so wishing I was there at the time, or I was there. And I was thinking, like Cleopatra and Mark Antony. They didn't have to go to school, did they? God knows what happened in those pyramids. Yeah.
I mean, you went to Waukegan High School, right?
What?
You went to Waukegan High School, which is now the Jack Benny High School.
Yes.
Renamed.
Yeah.
Do you remember having any sex education?
I was thrown out of there account of sex. No, but listen, I think those things, and you hear it all the time about sex education in schools, and they're not delivering it right. They're not explaining it correctly. Gee, I've been married. Well, I didn't get married till I was 33 years old. I knew about sex when I was 28, for heaven's sake. Maybe 27. But I didn't know Mary helped me. You know, I mean,
Filled in a little gap.
Filled in a little bit. I mean, but I wish you could have heard this conversation of two couples, one against it and one for it. And I was sorry I wasn't there because, I don't know, maybe I'd have been too rough.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Well, you've got grandchildren now. Do you ever talk to your grandchildren about it? Do they come to you?
No, they're kids. You know, I have. Listen, you know Joni, my daughter, of course. So, I have grandchildren. I have 4. You know, everybody loves to brag about their grandchildren. I have one you met, a 14-year-old grandchild, right. Michael. In fact, you and I and Michael, we were at the launching of Apollo 11.
Right.
He was there, I was there. I took my grandson, who sat next to me. He's 14 years old and knows everything. You know, when the thing went up, Apollo 11, he explained it to me because I know nothing. And he told me why it goes up, why it goes around. I could have slapped his face, right? Knew all about everything. You know. I know nothing about mechanics. I don't know, are you mechanically minded?
Not really.
I'm not.
Not really.
If a light bulb goes out in my bedroom, I have to move to a new apartment. I don't know anything. But Joni, you know, has 4 children, my grandchildren. They call me Granddad. They call Mary Miss Mary, which I think is cute, the 4 of them. They call her Miss Mary. And she, and then I have a granddaughter, 12, who is a great tennis player. But she won't talk. You know, she'll only talk in one word, almost syllable. She'll talk like, if I get her on the phone, I'll say, her name is Maria. I'll say, hello, Maria, this is Granddaddy. She says, hello. I said, what are you doing? He said, nothing. I said, how are you? She says, fine. Do you play tennis today? She says, yes. That's all. I can't get anything out. And she's so blasé about tennis that she had a tournament not long ago on a Saturday afternoon. And I said to her, by the way, Maria, how did you do at the tournament? She says, which tournament? You just told me, I said, you were in a tournament Saturday. Oh, she says, I won it.
She's 12.
She's 12 years old. Very blasé. Then we have 2 small ones. One is 5, and a boy 5, Bobby, and a little girl, Joanna, same as your wife's name. And they are real, real cute. I play with them all the time. The other day I was playing with hey, you haven't said anything yet, have you?
No, I just...
As a rule, you can't keep his mouth shut, you know. But just let me, then you can talk.
No, I can tell. When a grandfather gets talking, don't interrupt.
I want to rave about my grandchildren. So Bobby, I was up there the other day, and he was drawing. He had a thick pencil, and he was drawing a house. Now, I want to tell you how kids can think. 5 years old he was. And he drew a house, but he drew it kind of lopsided. He drew the front of it, the side, and the back of it, which is impossible. You can't draw a house like that, the front, side, and back. So he showed it me. He says, look, Granddaddy. He said, look what I drew, a house. So I looked at it. I said, well, Bobby, the only thing is you didn't do it right. Because if anybody is there, if they're watching, looking at the house, they wouldn't be able to see the three sides of it. So he looked back, and he kept looking at it and looking at it, and then he looked up to me and he said, well, Granddaddy, there's supposed to be 3 people watching it. Isn't that marvelous?
Does he want a job writing?
Huh?
I'll hire him.
Well, I would hire him. And then the little girl was there. Can I talk 1 second? And the little one, 4 years old, and in the middle of it, she said to me, Granddaddy, I have to go to the bathroom desperately. This I've never heard.
Just from a kid?
Just from a 4-year-old kid, desperately.
I've got to interrupt here for a moment.
I think she had to go, too. I had it all over me.
That's desperate. You are now going to see another reason why Jergens lotion is #1 in softness. Hey, you've got a special coming up soon, haven't you?
Yes.
With Gregory Peck doing comedy.
Incidentally, before we talk about that, Ann Blythe is on the show.
Right.
Right. Now, Ann Blythe is Dennis Day's sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law, right.
Now, there's a fella getting back to sex education. Now, you know, when Dennis Day first came to work for me, remember when he first came on my show, he was a naive kid, single, knew about nothing. I told him about the birds and the bees and all of that, and the pollen and all of this. Now he's married. He has 11 kids. So I guess I explained it beautifully or something. I made it very interesting, don't you think? What'd you start asking
or
me?
didn't
I
explain
want to tell you
it enough.
about your show.
Oh, we had
I saw your show, and I thought it was a great hour.
Well, I thought it was a good show.
I really thought it was a very, very interesting hour.
We had...
I'll tell you what I liked. I'll tell you what I liked about it. I like anybody that tries something. Try something different, and you did. You tried to do a show with all comedy scenes without a lot of other junk in between, and I thought it came off very well. Of course, some was, you know, better than other parts of it, you know. Then there were other parts that weren't as good
as some of the other
big parts, you know.
You were going...
But some of it was great.
Good.
Some of it was lousy, but most... No.
But it was all on.
It was all on, and it was very, very good.
When we come back, I'm going to read you
What?
one review of the show, just for comment, which I probably shouldn't do, because I never answer critics. You know,
Yeah.
they have a right to criticize the show. Everybody sees it the way they... But I want to read you one review to show you what critics do or do not see, which is interesting. Would you think that would be all right to do?
Well...
I know you're against using
Now, wait a
critics.
minute.
Now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'll ask you the question again.
Then I'll tell you what I would do.
All right, we'll be right back. I said I may or may not should have brought this up. Because, as I said, when critics review television shows, they're entitled, if they're thoughtful, constructive critics, to give an impression of what they see or like or dislike. But when they don't know what they're doing, then I think it's wrong. And the only reason I wanted to read this one review, our specials had mixed reviews. Some of us thought it was a great hour. Some thought it was a disaster. This particular gentleman thought it was a disaster. I won't quote his name. It's from what we call a trade paper, you know, that they have within the business.
You read it, and then I'll tell you what I usually do.
All right. Now, the only reason I'm reading this is because I'll show you. Here's what he said. I'm not going to read the whole review because I don't like it. But here's what he says. First of all, he said it was a disaster. He said, by the sheer law of averages, there were a few chuckles in the hour. But for most of the running, it was tasteless, shoddy, scarcely professional. Next line. All that worked was the laugh track. Now, I don't know if you know what a laugh track is. Many comedy shows use what they call a pre-recorded audience laughter. And when you tell a joke, you simply put on the record or the piece of tape and you play the audience laugh. One thing we did not do in this show, we did all of our show in one take in front of a studio audience of some 300 people in New York. We did not add one single laugh to the show. We took the laughs that came from the studio audience. We didn't sweeten and we didn't enlarge them. So here he says in one sentence there were a few chuckles in the hour. Then he says all that worked was the laugh track. Some man is obviously inept to write a review and doesn't know the business. That's what makes me angry. If he doesn't know a laugh track from a studio audience, what is he writing a special?
Well,
He admits on one hand that we got a lot of laughs.
All right.
On the other hand, he says we got a few chuckles.
Now, let me tell you something, if I may.
Certainly.
I'm a little older than you are.
You're older than anybody.
Then I'm certainly older than you are. Now, let me tell you. You have to use laugh tracks when you have to do scenes that you cannot physically do in front of an audience.
Absolutely.
Then you have to use a laugh track,
right.
You see, which has to be done, because sometimes you have scenes. But you see, now I have had a lot of wonderful reviews in my career. I've also had a lot of rotten ones. Really, some that they just hated me.
Right.
I have never thanked a critic for a good review. I have never complained to a critic for a bad one. What you just did was fine because you tried to explain something. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I would not let anybody know that I read it or I didn't read it. Everybody saw your show. Those who liked it, liked it. Those who didn't. And that's the end.
No, I'll grant you.
That's the end of the whole thing. I never, once in a while, I might meet a critic who was very nice to me, and I'll say thanks for what you said, but never in a letter.
Right.
Or if I see someone who panned me, I'll never mention that I read it, because it's too late. The show is over.
Right.
It isn't like doing a Broadway show where you hope and pray that everybody is going to give you great, great notices. But I think the smart thing to do is you try to forget it, and you've done the show, you've heard from your friends, you've heard from severe critics about how it is. I'm going to tell you something. There are some people who just don't like you nor me. And if I had $1, tax-free, for everybody who didn't like me, I'd be worth a bloody fortune. That's all I can tell you.
I think.
And so I get mad for a second at a critic if I think the show is good. And then I think maybe it wasn't so good. Maybe he was right. I don't know. And then,
I think
in a short time, you forget about it, and you got to think about, now I got a special coming up, December 3rd.
Can I make just one more comment? I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right in what you say.
Yeah.
As I said, it probably is self-indulgent. And I don't really mind being panned by a critic if he says, I didn't particularly like the show. That I can understand. Comedy is
Well, he
relative.
said things that
Well, what
yeah.
he said was, he obviously said in here that he doesn't know his business. I don't mind him saying there were a few chuckles, but you can't then turn around and say we were using a laugh track when we had a lot of laughs on the show. I was doing this really as a public service, so this publication can get better employees.
Isn't that funny?
That's really what I'm doing.
Isn't that funny?
Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. We have a smaller group of us than usual, but a delightful group. We have Hope Sears with us. Hey, Hope. So wonderful to have you. And Kathy Fuller-Seeley. Hey, Kathy. And me. So we're going to chat about an episode. I've brought it out before, but it was a number of years ago. I don't think I had nearly as many listeners and things, so kind of a cool one to bring. I don't know of anybody else that has it in their collection. I haven't seen, it's not one that pops up very often. One of the reasons I don't haven't played it as much is because it's audio, and of course it's of a video format show. So it's the Tonight Show, but this is just the audio from it. But it's such good, this nice clear audio, and to hear Jack on the Tonight Show is always worth sharing, and to hear Johnny on it, is fantastic. And this is such a unique one. I don't think he ever talks so much about personal things in his life. He talks about his grandkids and things, and it's got this whole weird kind of section on sex education that is unique. And I never thought I'd ever hear Jack Benny talking about sex education.
And that he
You
wants to
you know
talk about.
you were listing on a whiteboard like all the topics you think Jack Benny might ever cover. I don't think that would ever be on anyone's list as one of the
Well,
topics. that he
no,
would cover.
I think this could be part of his Vegas routine. I bet that Johnny's giving him space because it's so well put together. It's my guess what he was doing out in Vegas and Tahoe to be hip. So
Yeah. Could very well be. Could very well
and
be.
that will lead to his parody of Woody Allen's, sex comedies and things like that. So, in a way, this goes along with some of the specials he's going to be making
Right.
when he's I'm an old guy and I'm going to talk about sex.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the thing is, this is from 1969. To me, when you hear the topic that they talk about, it sounds like it'd be from 1973 or
Yeah.
something. 69 seems pretty early.
you're right. I don't think primetime TV was ready for Jack to talk about sex. So thank God this is late night. So.
Exactly. And I think at this point, Jack's like, I'll talk about whatever I feel like talking about, and it's fine, right? What are they
And
going to
no
do?
one's going to stop him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Hope, what were your thoughts on this, or what stood out to you on this one?
I liked, we were kind of talking before, I really liked him talking about his grandkids. And I actually didn't really care for the sex talk so much, but I did like what I kind of found interesting was their discussion about critics was
Yes.
very fascinating to me, as someone that performs and has watched a lot of performances and stuff. I found that very fascinating and very educational and insightful, because Johnny is essentially kind of calling out a critic, which he does say it's rare to do, and it's rare for Johnny to, like, in 30 years I don't think I've ever heard him call out a critic, and which is very, quite
Right.
interesting to hear why he's calling out this critic, and he does explain. So that's just kind of fascinating to me. And then having Jack kind of pile on top of that, basically, saying like you shouldn't talk about it at all. Just ignore it, good or bad, because that, people are, you don't want to call someone out, because you might run into them later, or whatever. People, it's already over and done with, the whatever they're calling out, especially if it's live. If it's a live performance that's never gonna happen again, or something that was in the moment that's never gonna happen again, there's no reason to, reach out. Which I was like, okay, that's an interesting, like, kind of delineate, like, it's different because, if you're a Broadway show, yeah, you want to keep the good reviews coming. You might want to, yeah, because that performance is going to happen again. But that was just fascinating for me to
Well,
hear.
and what's so funny is for our listeners and watchers and everything, they're not going to get the tie-in that I got from this, and I don't think either of you are going to probably get it. Kathy might remember back to this. It's a long time ago for her. For me, I just listened to it 2 days ago. I listened to these almost back to back. So what I was going to tie it to is Orson Welles. On our Orson Welles presentations, we just presented the episode this week. I mean, this you guys aren't going to connect it together either, the listening audience, because I'm recording this back to back with hearing that. But this is gonna be released sometime, probably months down the road, so you're not going to make this connection. But I'll make it for you, for everybody. But Orson is really upset with his critics at the reception that his Around the World in 80 Days got. And so he talks about critics, how bad they are, how good, whatever. He talks a lot about critics, and then he talks about a voodoo and making it sound like he's casting a voodoo thing or hoping that a voodoo thing will go and get them attacked, sort of thing. It's bizarre, but I just thought it was interesting to hear two folks that I haven't heard talk too much about critics, both talk about critics within the same time frame of a few days of each other for me. I thought it was interesting with that.
And yeah, you're right. They generally don't, and I think there's a definite reason for that. Because I mean, if you've ever heard like people panning critics, it usually comes off as sounding terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I thought this didn't work out that well. I thought, to me, Johnny sounded a little bit whiny and things somewhat. Yeah. And even though he's trying not to, even though he's trying to say, I've latched onto this because of the fact that we didn't use a laugh track, and he thought we used a laugh track, so laughs were real. So he said we didn't get any laughs, but we did get laughs. And
so I can see both ways now that I perform, because like yes, if you're a writer, that sounds like he's just being whiny, but if you're a performer, it matters so much if you're saying like, oh, this was canned laughter. It's like, no, this
I earned that.
I earned that. Yeah. Like you like, yeah, it's not a one,
but it just shows
such a difference.
Yeah, he's got a reason for doing it. But even with a reason,
it sounds whiny because he's a person.
There's just no way. I mean, and anyone else talking about it wouldn't even have a reason. The reason would be that they criticized me and I don't like it. Right. But even with him having a valid reason, it still comes across as whiny. And I think Jack realized that, and I have a feeling Johnny realized that probably after the fact, and wished he could have said it better or would have done it differently. And that's why he doesn't revisit this. That's why we never hear him talk about critics again. I can think.
I feel like you almost need somebody else to bring up, because, like, I think my like personal hero Conan, like when he had like the interview with Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose is specifically asking about a devastating review of Conan, and like, he talks about it, but he's very gracious, of course, but like, even so, you can tell he doesn't want to talk about it. And that reviewer ultimately changed his mind. But yeah, but that's one of the reasons why you don't want to talk about it, is because you want people to be able to change their mind on their own, and not have someone call you out as whiny, and then they're never going to change their mind.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, if the same exact thing would have been brought up by Jack about on Johnny Carson's behalf, and he mentioned all of those same things, it wouldn't have seemed whiny. It would have seemed like, oh, here's a mentor. Backing him up, and that would have worked great. But go ahead, Kathy.
But if you think back to how Jack talked about criticism on his own show, he handled it beautifully, because he would pull out of his pocket a written review, and then they would make up some of the most scurrilous language possible, and they would have the terms of opprobrium so difficult that Jack can make fun of the word. You know, I'm sure he made it up. You know, but I don't understand what is opprobrium, you know, or, you know, just, and so that was a very great, a very funny way of addressing negative criticism by just sort of putting the critic in this sort of high, a nerdy spot, using language that Jack doesn't understand. It both sort of acknowledges, you know, he didn't say I was lousy, you know, he just he used this impossible word, and so that was a great way of dealing with it.
One of my favorite Jack Benny lines that comes out like sometimes is, "Did you know execrable means lousy?"
Yes.
Like,
Yes. So.
I love that too.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it, like you mentioned, Jack, in a false way or in a written way, talks about critics a lot more than anybody else I can think of, in that almost, I won't say always, a lot, very season after season, many seasons of his show, the second episode of his show, he will come on and say, oh, and it'll always be, the reviewers are always like, from American Fisherman gives us 4 reels and a hook or whatever, and they say that the show was fabulous or whatever, and so there'll be good ones and bad ones, and they'll make fun of the good ones and bad ones, but they're not real reviews, but they'll say it's a review of our last episode. And that was his thing. And I think they came up with, Harry Conn came up with that first, probably. I'm not sure, but Kathy might know more about that one.
Not sure about that. So, well, okay. I'll have to get a little bit.
How early does that go? I don't know, because it was within the first few seasons of Jack's show. Anyway, it was certainly because I think they did it on the very first season with Phil Harris, which is 36, 37.
37.
Yeah.
That's after.
So I don't know if they were doing it before that or not.
Yeah. I did want to mention a famous, historically, radio episode where a prominent magazine writer, a radio critic, had written that Jack's humor was too mean. That they were saying shut up to each other, and he mentions it, and so Jack actually has him on the radio program and makes him sort of sit in a chair and say, okay, you say our comedy is too mean, we're gonna put on a nice show. And you hear the birds tweeting, and they all say hello and a wonderful thing is and everything, and they have to have the critics say, so what do you think of that? And he gets to go, oh, it's terrible. So and then to agree that the Jack sort of ragging on each other's humor was a lot funnier than just being nice all the time. So
well, and it's so funny that to think of Jack's show as being a mean show, that never like occurs to me, that his show, I mean, there's so many other shows that are
a lot meaner.
Meaner. Oh yeah. To my mind, not necessarily mean, but vicious in some ways, or relentless, whatever, is like the Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy. I mean, Charlie could just rip people apart because he's a supposed to be a dummy, and so he can get away with anything. It's like kids can get away with almost anything, and so could Charlie, even though it was Edgar's voice coming through Charlie. Right. And Edgar was so nice. Edgar was such a nice person. Charlie was a vicious.
It could all come out in Charlie. Bob Hope about his underlings could also be, the way Bob Hope was about females. It's like,
yeah.
So, but
agreed. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna add to like the nice like critic thing. I wonder if that's kind of where they got the idea for when Franklin Graham was on the show, and basically he did say like, oh, you're too mean, to your underlings, basically, and kind of like calling out like how mean he was to Dennis Day and
oh, you mean Billy Graham?
That's what I meant. Oh my God!
But I was going Franklin. He was
no Billy Graham. You're right. You got me. Yeah, I'm tired.
But-
It's
but it's a
morning, okay.
But it's an excellent point of being able to use those contrasts to
Yes.
sort of to critique the show. So
Yeah.
Well, the other critique thing that stands out to me, and Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I believe there's a story, and I believe it's true, I think, or somewhat true, that a critic said good things about Jack's show, that how funny they were, how great that episode was, and things.
yes, okay.
And then Jack sent him a copy of the script
He asked for the
because he
script.
loved the show so much. Then the critic reads through the script and realize on the written page it looks like there's nothing there, or not much, with lots of pauses and lots of other things. And so then he, I believe, calls them out at that point for
Right,
it.
then says, "Oh, this is all crap. I was mistaken."
Yeah, yeah. And so it's like, and so Jack's got to be going, you just can't win. You just can't win.
No,
He liked
so
it.
the network then pulled the critic out and wined and dined him all over Southern California to get him to change his mind. He was
Oh, wow.
so, but you're right. That was another very famous episode of.
Yes, yes. And that it's just so funny how uh, Jack tells him not to deal with this critic.
Yeah.
But in reality, Jack had over time dealt with critics more than just about anybody else probably has, with discussing them and making jokes about them, and just everything that he did with critics, whether they were real or fake.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting. And then I want to talk about a couple things here real quick before I forget them. One is, I always think that interactions between Johnny and Jack are so interesting and sometimes so awkward to me, because, and Jack is not the best interviewee, I don't believe, because he won't let people lead him places. They set things up for him to run with it, and then Jack will go the opposite direction or go, oh, before I get to that, and then talk for 5 minutes on something else. Well, then you didn't even get to that. And so then the interview, and he does it probably more to Johnny than just about anybody else. Because Johnny on these, once we'll hear these interviews, probably not necessarily back to back, but close together, where you're going to go, oh, okay, because they sort of have a style of working with each other. And it's Johnny always going, okay, well, I have Jack on so much because I love him, but I need to make him interesting, or need to make my show work. So I need to have the pump primed and be ready to get him into places where I think we can have an interesting dialogue. So you can tell in this particular one, Johnny at some point is thinking that the sex chat is going too long. And so then he says, oh, and you've got a show coming up, or what, to try and steer him into talking about a show. And then Jack goes back to continuing to talk. Oh, and I've got another thing about that whole sex thing. So you could just hear Johnny. And so often you hear Johnny sort of sigh, as like, okay, we're going to go for this thing. It just doesn't go necessarily the way he wants. And Jack does do that with other interviewers, like I say, as well. But generally speaking, it's like the better he knows the interviewer, the more he takes control, and the less he knows the interviewer, he lets the interview go like a normal interview does. And which is unfortunate, because Johnny and he are so close that he doesn't feel bad at all about totally derailing his whole segment every time. And so virtually you're never going to get I would love to have a segment where he's interviewing him and Johnny asks questions and Jack answers the questions. He can go with a story, but stick with the story and then end the story, and then have Johnny ask another question. But that's not what you ever get from these two.
But you wouldn't, I don't think you would have gotten the discussion about the grandchildren if they weren't so close,
Yes.
Because for me, it sounds like some of the awkwardness, I feel like, comes from the fact that they are on a show and they can't talk the way they normally do.
Yes.
And you can tell that they're very close. It's like they're trying to continue a private conversation on air, but
Right.
it doesn't quite work.
And I think Johnny knows how to do that
Yeah.
probably better than Jack does, because
Yeah.
Johnny's used to interviewing people like off
Mhm.
camera, just chatting with them, and then on camera to have the interview. And so he's used to going back and forth. Whereas Jack sort of just has this relationship with Johnny, and so him navigating that is trickier, I think. The other thing about you, when you mention his grandkids, I love that they have lots of chat about the grandkids on here. I also especially love, probably more than any other episode I can think of interviews with Johnny, is you can completely tell Johnny just kind of pulls back and is like, let him go, let Jack go and talk. Jack loves talking about his grandkids. He's having fun talking about his grandkids. I don't care if it's boring to the listeners or whatever, my viewers. I want Jack to be able to go and express himself and share his thoughts on this. So he really he doesn't try and change the course once they get onto the grandkids, which is lovely. And Jack feels guilty about it. Jack says a couple times like, "Oh, but I'm just talking about my grandkids. I shouldn't do that." And Johnny encourages him, "No, you're good. Keep going." So
Yeah,
I love that.
which is nice and sweet.
Yeah. Kathy, what about this episode and or the grandkids piece, whatever piece you want to talk about? Did you?
That's no, we've done a great job with it. I think it's very sweet. You know, it would have been great to have the video with it, but knowing that we can picture it in our minds, that
Yes.
they're just sitting there talking with each other. So I think that it's okay. It captures Jack at a particular moment of his life, and also a particular moment in time, the upheaval of the 60s.
Right.
Thank God he's not talking about the war, but he's talking about everything else. We can put that together. But as I said, I have a feeling that some of the sex ed stuff came from his Vegas routines, or now that he was doing sort of more adult entertainment, now that his regular TV show was over. But a lovely chance to get to spend a little time with him. So.
And doesn't he talk about NASA just a smidgen on here that they?
That's when he's talking about, yes, that they were at the launch of Apollo 11, and
Correct.
Johnny was there and mentions it. And then he says his grandson knows so much, could explain to him so much more about the mechanics and science
Yes.
of the mission.
And he just wants to smack him.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting, these interviews, because as again, everything depends on juxtaposition and when you hear things. Like I was saying, how I heard the Orson thing about critics and this thing about critics, and kind of linked the two together. Well, in Jack's interviews, if you heard them completely separated by months at a time, you might not connect this together. But he goes into one of his other interviews with Johnny, he goes in depth about NASA and going to the launch and everything. And I think it was the same launch. I think it just stuck with him and became a core memory for him of this cool thing that they were actually launching things that he never thought would ever happen, like in his lifetime. It's amazing to him. And so he talks about it a lot. And it's neat to get that time frame where he's talking about this thing and revisiting it, and the next time it's more about, I think he's there with the vice president. I think at that point it's Spiro Agnew probably, and so I think he was with Spiro Agnew and talking about how he and Spiro Agnew were having a conversation, I believe. And I could be totally wrong. It could be a governor or something. He was with somebody who was a politician.
It was Spiro Agnew.
Okay, yeah.
They were like that.
And so it's just interesting to hear that piece. So we have what's lovely. It would be fantastic if we had all the Jack Benny appearances on the Tonight Show. We don't, but we have a decent chunk of them. So and some of them we only have an audio like this. Some like this in this case. Okay, I'm definitely presenting you all of what I have. Okay, if there was more Johnny Carson show, even if he was talking to Charo or something, I would be presenting that to you, because I don't like cutting things down or anything. So all I have is the interview segment of this episode. But Some of the future ones, I'll either have this same thing where it's just the interview section, or I may have the entire show from Johnny's monologue all the way through, and I'll present that if I have that. Sometimes I want to say I probably have 3 or 4 episodes that are just audio, and then we probably have another 3 or 4 that are actual
Wow.
video of what's going on. So
Well, lucky
we'll
us.
we'll present all those to you and give you a chance to hear all of them and everything. Because what we're doing, because this is going to be early, so this is good. This is going to be early in the summer that I'm presenting this, because this is 1969. We pretty much, either last summer or 2 summers ago, I can't remember, we presented Jack specials. And so they were Jack specials. I believe the first one we presented was from 1950. It might have been a non-Jack. It could have been, we might have started with Jack appearing with Bing Crosby in his 1954 special.
Yeah, I remember that.
So we were presenting Jack specials, but also interspersing chronologically specials that he had where he appeared with Bob Hope or whatever, right? On Bob Hope's special. Well, that took us all the way up. I think we hit about 1970-ish, right? It could have been 69, 70 that we ended with. We didn't present any of the Johnny Carson stuff, so we'll present this. This will probably be our first one, this 1969 interview. And then we'll go into the things that he did in 1970. Like we just recently recorded an intro for the 1970 Friars Club roast. And there's a number of things from 1970. There's one I think I want to revisit, what we're going to be doing soon, that these two folks, wonderful folks, haven't experienced yet, and I think it's worthwhile experience. It's the John Wayne's only special that he did in 1970.
Oh, okay. Gosh,
He
you played that
has
very
like
early in my.
everybody's on that. I mean, it's got the entire cast of Bonanza. It's got Jack Benny. It's got uh, George Burns. It's I think it might have Bob Hope. I mean, it's got just a little bit, and some of the guys from Star Trek, I think. Or I mean, it's just it's the gamut of everyone. It's not the totally best cutting edge special in the world, but it's kind of fun to see all those folks and talk about all of them and the things they're doing. And so, since it was just Terry and I presenting it, it'd be nice to get a few more of us like talking about it, I think. So some of the things we'll revisit, some of the things we'll be visiting for the first time, and it'll just be a fun summer of Jack Benny specials, and I'm really excited about it. Now, having said that about the Friars Club roast, just so folks are going, well, why didn't he present the Friars Club? He's talked about it. I don't know. I might try and present it. If I do, I would watch it quickly if I were you, because Hope Sears and I did one, what, back then, so 2 years ago or something, where we talked about the Friars Club roast, and it was up until last week. Last week, I got information that it was infringing on copyright, and so they told me I had to take it down. So I took it down. So it's not there anymore. Am I going to take a chance and throw another shot at it with more of us talking about it? Probably, but we'll see. Or maybe I'll cut it down and try and cut out some of the copyrighted stuff. Sometimes you can cut off the end credits and the beginning credits and just have the middle section. It gets away. I don't know. So
is that the one where I say, no,
yes.
that's not the name wrong?
It might be.
If I do,
it's one where in the note you apologized for being on your phone or something because you had something important coming up.
No, that one I know, but I almost am more embarrassed about saying Sule's name wrong. So if that's the one where I say his name wrong, I very much apologize.
Okay.
Dan would kill me.
Who knows? But you know what? These are live. We just do the thing, and whatever happens, happens. And sometimes we get things wrong. Heck, I get people pointing out things all the time that
right.
I see. Terry we had a recent one, and I was gonna, if Terry showed up today, I was gonna say he was fired and this was his last appearance with us because he actually made his first mistake. But there's one where he mentioned some fact wrong or something. It was an obscure thing. And
Oh,
yet he
wow.
puts in the comments, "Oh, I apologize for getting that wrong. I was talking about, oh, I know what it was. It was that he had said he watched the King for a Day episode of the
Yeah.
Jack Benny show, or heard it. It's audio on the radio show. I said, "Oh, I thought I remembered that being on Fred Allen's show with Jack guest starring on the Fred Allen show." And he said, "No, it was a Jack Benny show." Well, then later he looked into it, and then he in the notes said, "Oh, no, it was the Fred Allen show," and he was wrong. And I'm like, you can just let it go. You don't have to. I mean, when I make mistakes, and I make a lot of them, I don't go back and apologize or anything. I just go, "Hey, I'm doing the best I can." We're talking, we're trying, all of us are trying to remember and pull together what.
We're not Google. We're not AI.
Yeah, it's
Although
like
I've been
70,
fed
80
wrong
years.
information from an
Yeah,
AI before too,
we're
though.
trying to grab we're trying to have access in our little brains to 80 years worth of Jack Benny history, sort of thing. And then on top of that, besides that, it's old info. It's not like he's still, it's not like you're doing something on Jerry Seinfeld or something who's still here and that everything's is current. Everything we're talking about, the most current stuff we almost ever mentioned, is probably 50 years old, and then everything else is older than that. So it is tricky to get all of our facts straight. And so please bear with us. What's charming is, I will say this, everything we've done, every mistake anyone's ever made, I've never, okay, I won't say I've never, very seldom does anyone ever even comment on the mistake that was made. And I will say this, I think every time I've ever seen anybody comment on the mistake, it's not like, "Aha, I caught you. You did something wrong. You made a mistake." It's more like, "Oh, hey, when you mentioned this, it's really this, but I can totally see how it gets confusing," or whatever. They always do it in a very polite way, which is wonderful. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for really all of our folks that tune in. Lately, I've been I usually go on when we premiere our episodes on Sunday at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, Pacific time, and I go on usually at that time if I can. I don't do it every week, but I do it probably 3 out of 4 weeks. And there's a if you go to the premiere, then there's always like a chat thing you can do, a live chat. And so I'll be talking with a number of the folks that are watching it for the first time, and we'll just point things out and talk back and forth, and it's nice. It's always a nice discussion. And we started out by having maybe two of them and me, and now we have sometimes 12, 15
Wow.
folks and me. So it's nice. And so please continue to show up and have the dialogue. But I just am so thankful for everybody that does listen to us, everyone that does pay attention. I This last week, so this is gonna be a long time ago by this time, but whatever. This last week I was on there, and I was impressed because I can see in real time how many people are on, right? And so we're going through the special together. I mean, we're going through the episode together, and we play the episode first, and people are thankful we do the episode first. I didn't know. I was like, okay, if we start doing our intros after the episode, or our discussion after the episode, how many people are we going to lose? Are we going to lose like half of them just go, "Okay, I'm done. Jack's done. I'm going to turn it off." But I think there were, at that point, maybe there were 12 of us on there. And so they hit it. And then when they hit and it switched over to us talking, I thought, okay, it's going to go from 12 down to like 4. Everybody, 8 of them are going to leave. Nobody left. Everybody stayed through. And I was just curious, how long is this going to last before I lose people? So I just kept chatting mentioning things every once in a while, but just watching, and it was like, we never lost any of them. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool that at least the small sampling I had of 12 people stayed the whole time. And so I'm hoping folks enjoy our conversation. They seem to, and that's great. And we don't often talk about them. and they're an important part of what we do, and why we keep bringing it. I mean, would we, the three of us and more of us, be doing this every week if we only had three people listening or watching? Probably not. So it's nice that we have hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people tuning into us. But Hope had something.
Let me see if I can find this.
We're connected.
I have a perfect little clip for you of when I interviewed Robert Smigel of going back to the critics stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can find it. I have it pulled up here.
And whether they'll be able to hear it or not, sometimes Zoom edits things out, so we'll see.
Yeah.
In the room.
Let's see.
And for me, that was all I needed.
I'm sorry if you have to
Like,
do
we're
some
connected.
editing here.
We're connecting with some.
Hold on.
Oh,
Maybe I just-
my viewers know I don't do editing, so this.
Okay.
No. Actually, I do.
Oh, I found it.
I
Okay,
probably
hold
will
on.
edit some.
Let me see. Let me pull up Zoom again and see if I can share.
Do you need me to share? I mean, do you want me to turn so you can share your video as well? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely will edit some of this.
How do I do
So let's
this?
see. How do I give you permission for that again? I
Right.
click over on your window. That's
share, send request.
Hope is requesting multiple presenters share, allow. Okay. That should give you permission to do it.
Okay, so if I hit share, Final Cut. Nope, not that. That's a bunch of Jack Benny pics, though. Hold on, here we are.
Yes. And that's what matters. I'm not making this shit for critics. And nobody is.
Yeah, not making this for critics.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like. It's kind of what I feel that Jack was saying. Like, you're not doing this for the critics. Like, you're ignore them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I guess indirectly I was talking about critics too, and us self-criticizing and things. So this is a whole thing on critics. My goodness.
Yeah.
There you go.
Don't self-criticize either.
There you go. And I will state that all the laughs on this program are genuine. We don't use a laugh track.
No laugh tracks.
Well, I know.
That's where you edit and add a laugh track.
I will say that sometimes I try and do a bit, and you guys know I'm doing a bit, and so I think I get extra laughs at something that doesn't go as well as I'd hoped. But I thank you for that. You guys are a great audience, so it's awesome. And I love doing this, and I love that Hope was able to come today. Thank you, Hope, because it's a treat when you come, because you don't make it every time or whatever, but about once a month or so you seem to pull in here, and it's lovely. And what perfect timing. So often it is when we're short or something and we don't. It's not like I'm sure people out there are going, oh, Buck knew that he was going to be someone short, so he begged Hope to come in and pinch hit on this one.
Is that why? Do I happen to come in every time?
Pretty much, it's a lot of it. And sometimes, it's just been you and I. So it's like, I've never had a week. Maybe I've had one. I don't think so though, where no one showed up. It's always, and we don't arrange it. It's just sort of like, oh, here's the shows and show up. And sometimes it'll be one of you and sometimes it'll be 8 of you.
I'm a little disappointed though that we didn't talk about our other episode that we were recording.
Yes.
Want to talk about Truman. I do.
You do.
I got my vote for Gracie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was prepared to talk about our other recording that we were but okay.
Good to know.
Okay. I had pictures pulled up, Buck.
Oh my gosh. Well, here, I'll let them go and then we'll talk some more. So
okay.
Enjoy the show. Thank you so much.